peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 4 baking books, including Snackable Bakes. In each episode, I hang out with some of the sweetest bakers around and take a deep dive into their signature bakes. My guest today is Tanya Bush. Tanya is a writer, editor, and baker. She's the co-founder of Cake Zine and the author of the book, Will This Make You Happy? Stories and Recipes from a Year of Baking, which is out next Tuesday. Tanya's work has appeared in the New York Times, New York Magazine, Eater, and more. She's also the pastry chef for Table of Contents and Little Egg, a restaurant in Brooklyn. Tanya joins me to talk about how she got into baking and food writing, about Cake Zine, about the year that inspired her book, and the things she baked during that year. There was a chocolate coconut cake that tasted like it came from a box, yum, and why she wanted to write about it. Then we talk crullers. Tanya has 2 recipes in her book, and she walks me through her toasted poppy seed with lemon curd one, and we touch on her plum cardamom one, too. Tanya believes that the cruller is the perfect blank canvas for a variety of flavor combos, and she has literally perfected the cruller. One of her secrets? It's freezing them before frying. Brilliant. Tanya was such a delight to talk to, so stay tuned for our chat. You can find today's recipe at cherrybombe.substack.com. Peeps, did you hear the news? Jubilee New York 2026 is happening on Saturday, April 25th at the Glass House in Manhattan, and tickets are on sale now. Jubilee is Cherry Bombe's annual conference celebrating women and creatives in the world of food and drink. It'll be a beautiful day of connection and community, plus delicious bites and sips. You'll meet other thoughtful food folks and be inspired by the featured speakers, panelists, and more. I had such a great time at last year's event, and I know this year's will somehow be bigger and better. Tickets are on sale now at cherrybombe.com. If you're an official Bombe Squad member or a paid Substack subscriber, be sure to use your discount code at checkout. You can find it in your inbox or on our Substack website. Head to cherrybombe.com for all the details. I hope to see you there. Let's chat with today's guest. Tanya! So excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to chat crullers with you and so much more.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Can you start us off with an early baking memory or a baked good eating memory from childhood?
Okay, I love that question. I think food was generally sort of like utility and function over pleasure when I was growing up, but dessert was the meal that we took very seriously. And I have this like particular memory of rifling through the America's Test Kitchen cookbook, which is something I sort of mentioned in the book. It was this like big sort of like tattered binder at some point, and they had this coconut cake. And it was like a yellow cake, a sort of like plush buttery crumb. And then I think it was a very simple sort of like cream cheese frosting with like shredded coconut, sweetened coconut, sort of just mixed right in. And I remember being so enamored by the photo of the cake and thinking, my God, I want to actualize this. I think I was maybe like 11 at this point. And it was the first time I remember like taking out like the egg beater that we had, you know, that had been covered in dust and sort of like cloistered away under the oven for, you know, a couple years, and pulling it out and making this cake come to fruition. And it was such a enlivening, exciting moment because one, I felt like, oh my God, I can just eat something delicious. I'm licking the batter. I'm having so much fun. And also, you know, I can actualize this thing that just existed on the page and bring it into the real world, and how special and fun. So that was definitely like a formative
how old did
baking
you say
memory.
you started?
I think I was probably like 11. It's pretty young.
And also, what a good choice. Coconut cake is like my favorite thing.
It's the best cake.
Oh my gosh. And I love like an 11-year-old who's like would rather have coconut than chocolate, because I bet there's a chocolate in that ATK book, and you went coconut. I
think I went coconut.
Yeah.
I like chocolate a lot. I think chocolate has its purpose, but I've never been a chocolate fiend.
Yep, even when you were little. And what about like a baked good eating memory, like maybe at a restaurant or a bakery or something like a Devil Dog or a Suzy Q, or like, you know what I mean? It can be anything that like it doesn't have to be baked good by like a human. It could be a machine.
Oh, I have like a very sweet memory of going to this ice cream shop. And I grew up in this small town in New Jersey where there were 4 different ice cream shops, and they were sort of like warring factions in a nation state, and everyone had their sort of alliances to a particular one. And we had our local. And when we were growing up, it was cash only. And I remember that after school, my mother would often take us and we would be like rooting around in the backseat of our minivan looking for quarters and nickels and dimes to, I think it must have been like $2 at the time to get a small or something, maybe even like $1.50, which now feels, so distant.
Yeah.
But, rooting around, trying to find these coins and then like having enough and getting to go in and, sort of feeling naughty because it's a backwards day and you're eating dessert before dinner. And I would always get a small cookies and cream. Cookies and cream was always what I loved. And it's such a sort of like nostalgic ice cream flavor for me. And I love Oreos and I love something with like chunks in it.
All good.
And so I just really remember ice cream as this sort of important, formative part of my childhood.
Love. You've said your parents were not really big cooks, but also in the book, you do write that your parents and your sister kind of instilled in you an insatiable appetite for dessert. How did that happen?
Totally. I think that's a great question. I definitely need to set the record straight. I think my mother has taken issue with the fact that I've said that she didn't cook at all. And she did make a lot of extemporaneous stews. That was like absolutely her forte. We were eating a lot of delicious like vegetable forward stews with like the things that were in our pantry. My mother had a milkshake every day she was pregnant with me and my sister. It was a chocolate and coffee milkshake from the ice cream shop I was just telling you about. I literally feel as if I was like weaned on dessert. Sugar was in my veins before I was born. And we did really have this true appreciation and love for the celebratory, frivolous pleasure of eating something sweet at the end of the night. So even if food in and of itself was not, thought about seriously or as an art form or as, like the most important thing in a day, dessert, I think, and specifically ice cream was this like true source of desire and pleasure. And we ate it recklessly and it was delicious. So I feel very grateful that was something I was introduced to early.
Yeah, no, I grew up with dessert every day.
Dessert every day.
Yeah, like there was no question that when you finished dinner, you had dessert. So you kind of have already touched on this, but I did want to talk about the America's Test Kitchen Family Cookbook because I have it. My mother-in-law gave it to me. In the book, you write a little bit about that banana bread at age 12, sort of your first cookbook experience. I'm kind of impressed that like your parents had that cookbook. Like maybe the stews came out of it.
My mother, she does not adhere to a recipe. She is very much sort of macho in this particular way about entirely decrying and, overcoming a recipe. Yeah. She is, cooking, smelling, tasting, adjusting, which, as I think is very much a constitutive part of baking. But she's very much like, I'm doing this on my own time. Like, I know how to put things together and make them taste good. And she does know how to do that. So I don't know why we had that cookbook. Yeah. It must have been sort of like given to them at some point along the way. I think we had like that and like the joy of cooking, some of the classics, but we really were not a cookbook household by any means. It was very much sort of like, you cook with what you have that's around. And then there's also, fish sticks and lean cuisines to supplement,
Did you have the cookbook in your apartment? In the start of the book, one of the first things you make is a banana bread. Did you have the cookbook? Like, did you take it? No.
I did not. No, that was in New Jersey. And
you were not like attached to it. So you're like, I'm traveling with this thing.
No. Okay. I only in retrospect and in the writing of this moment was like truly imbuing it with the significance that it had. Like, I think when I was growing up, I wasn't like, this is really important to me. And the America's Test Kitchen Cookbook, I was like, this is the cookbook that I have. And, we have this like, recipes were not readily available in the same way on the internet that they are now. And so that was sort of my easy access into baking,
Totally. I'm glad that we've talked about ice cream because we're going to talk about it some more. You had a high school job at like an artisanal ice cream shop, which you kind of say is in some kind of impetus for your pursuit of pastry. Tell us about the shop and tell us about your favorite flavors besides cookies and cream or Oreo.
Totally. Yeah, this was a different ice cream shop than the one that our family had pledged ourselves to. It's called the Ben Spoon, and it is an incredible ice cream shop. It's still around, and I think it's a really special place because it was sort of like early to the like local organic farm to table movement in New Jersey. And, I think they have an amazing mix of both sort of like playful and experimental flavors like lavender mascarpone and, sweet basil. And even they do like a, Christmas tree flavor, right? That's literally like steeping like the pine needles right into the ice cream base. But they also have, like the traditional, they've got like a delightful hazelnut flavor, incredible chocolate sorbet. That was the first chocolate sorbet I had that, changed my understanding of what could be vegan. And I think it was and I worked there for 5 years. I mean, I think I worked there my first summer after college too. And it was really special because like we also participated in the making of the ice cream itself. So there was a lot of like food prep that was happening in the background before you were or after you were serving customers. And so I just felt like it was a really interesting ethos in food that I hadn't really encountered before. And I loved it. And I loved getting to eat the ice cream. And I always had a scoop on my shift. And they continue to make really delicious like cupcakes and cookies. And every time I'm back in town, I always go back.
And is bent spoon like that thing where you stick the spoon in the ice cream and it bends?
And it bends? Because the ice cream's so hard?
Well, that's why it's a funny name to me. Because when I think about like when they give you the plastic spoon and you go like this and you go like this and it like snaps.
And it snaps.
Heads across the...
That's funny. My spoon never broke.
Yeah.
I don't really know the lore behind the name.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's some good ice cream. If you're ever out in New Jersey, you should check it out.
Besides the America's Test Kitchen book, any other cookbooks and any food TV, like Food Network stuff when you were growing up? Any of that interesting to you?
I really didn't watch a ton of TV. I feel like
was that like a family rule?
Kind of. TV wasn't.
Were you kind of hippies?
That would maybe be strong.
Yeah.
There were particular rules around television. Definitely watched it. I did somehow become a Real Housewives fanatic in high school. So don't remember how that happened, but it did. I
used to go to friends' houses, watch TV, and then come home and be like, okay, I'm ready for my hour of TV now. And no, I had just done 4 hours.
Ruthless. I love it. That's how you do it. That's how you learn. Totally. Yeah, I didn't really watch a lot of food TV. And I mean, I think I never really clocked my interest in food is I think one of the things that really felt interesting about turning to baking eventually, because I think I was I like sweets. Occasionally I'm making something on the side, but I'm not out here interested in it in any professional way, even really in a personal way. I never quite thought of it as a hobby.
Yeah.
It just felt like this thing that you do occasionally, and maybe it's a part of your life, but it wasn't central by any means. And I think that's why, it's been quite interesting now, with the pleasure of distance and retrospect, you're sort of well, it all makes sense. I loved to bake when I was 12 and now I'm a pastry chef. So, you can really imbue it with this feeling of significance. But in reality, I was just sort of I like eating dessert and sometimes I like to make it, but I'm not out here searching for more, really trying to learn how to do it.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Cherry Bombe's new issue is here. It's called Mom's the Bombe and has 3 amazing covers featuring these dynamic mother-daughter duos. Chloe Crane LaRue and her mom Trudy, who are the co-authors of the cookbook, The Artful Way to Plant-Based Cooking. Sama Dada and her mom Shermeen. Sama is the founder of Dada Eats and a cookbook author. And food stylist and entertaining expert Romilly Newman and her mom Antonia, a casting director, screenwriter, and filmmaker. Chloe, Sama, and Romilly all share a deep bond with their moms who have influenced their culinary styles and careers. Don't miss their cover stories with original photography by Jennifer Livingston. This issue is also packed with delicious recipes, beautiful photos, and heartfelt essays. Head over to cherrybombe.com to subscribe now to guarantee your copy, or pick up a copy at your favorite local bookstore or culinary shop. Now back to our guest. After college, you have a job, you're working, and the pandemic hits. Job goes away, you're living with your boyfriend, and you're lost. Fair?
Totally fair.
Okay.
Languishing.
And he buys you this cookbook, The Science of Baking, which I love because you're ugh. You're not excited at first, and then you realize it's an incredible gift.
Totally.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that was this particular moment where I had this idea that baking was going to be a hobby that I would sort of use to claw my way to happiness. And, it's this very particular moment in time in which everyone is baking sourdough and banana bread. And there are all these articles online saying this is going to cure your existential malaise and your dread. And I was sort of that seems unlikely, but maybe give it a whirl. And, originally I was sort of lambasting that idea online. I was also at the same time, I had started this anonymous Instagram account called Will This Make Me Happy? And the answer was always no. But I think that when I was given that book, I felt that my boyfriend at the time was really trying to make me professionalize and perfect this thing when all I wanted was a hobby, when in reality it was actually like an extraordinarily important moment. I also think that I was very averse to the idea that baking was chemistry because it felt like it really mystified the process. And I think one of the true pleasures I had in teaching myself how to bake is that, and not going to pastry school, is that I could abide by my own rules and I could figure out what worked for me. And so the way that I bake feels very oriented towards cooking in a lot of ways. It's a lot of smelling and touching and noticing and tasting and adjusting. And I think that this idea that baking was chemistry felt very sort of scary and alienating and not seductive at all to me. And so there was that real moment of feeling like, this is not what I'm turning to baking for. I don't need a science project. Like, I'm here to try and find some pleasure of any kind.
Yeah, well, he was like, he was professionalizing your hobby when you weren't ready to be like, and giving it this scientific spin.
But in fact, I think it's a really important moment because, there's this scene in the book that, happened in real life where the narrator looks at herself in the mirror and is like, okay, I'm going to become a pastry chef, not a baker, a pastry chef. And pastry chef has it's a professional term and it's this sense of identity suddenly. And I think that this book is so much about trying to locate a sense of purpose and meaning and fulfillment and a sense of who you are. And at that moment, and when you're 23, often that comes through like the label of a job. And so I think that though I was averse to that gift at the beginning, it was extraordinarily important because it actually, for the first time, reminded me, oh, this is like a whole world. This is an entire realm that like people have dedicated their lives to. There is science and technique behind this. And, millions of people who've like worked on this for over, many centuries, if not a millennia. So I think I don't know if I would have really gotten to that place without that book.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about starting the Instagram account. And I love that you were like kind of pushing back against this idea that baking was going to be so meditative and fabulous. And you're like, no.
Yeah. The answer was always no for a very long time.
Did it start with things you were baking at home and then you were
Yes.
photographing them and like, this is what I made, but I'm not any happier?
Totally.
Yeah.
It was exactly that.
Yeah.
It was sort of chronicling of time through the things I was baking.
Yeah.
And this like slight poking fun at the idea that it was actually going to work better than like, say, my SSRIs.
Yes, exactly.
Or whatever, which were also really not that effectual at that time. I think it was a kind of fun opportunity to like complain publicly. And also like it ended up becoming a tool for meeting other people in the pastry world and in the baking community more generally. I was entirely anonymous online for, I think, at least 3 or 4 years. And I was really just like a disembodied hand with like a pastry on my fingertips. And that was a very intentional choice because I think, as much as I was writing personally about, having thin skin or, a massive ego or whatever these things were, I really wanted to protect anonymity. And that was extremely important to me. And so it's been interesting to sort of like let some of that go and also tell a, very personal story in the context of this book. But yeah, Instagram was a really powerful tool. It's how I met Eliza and we run Cake Zine together. It's really brought me into incredible community with a lot of super inspiring bakers. So I feel very lucky that I did it.
You write about the chocolate coconut cake in the book. Mm-hmm. And what I love about this is your boyfriend at the time. You make him this cake, his mom told you about it, blah, 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 blah. And he gives you, in my opinion, the highest compliment, which is it tastes like it came from a box because I love the way a box cake tastes. And you were not happy.
I was not happy.
Do you see the beauty in that though now or no?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what's been really interesting is, it's strange to be both like the subject and the perspective, right, of a book. But, I was writing this book in retrospect and now I'm, thinking about it with a lot more critical distance. And, the me of now versus the narrator of then is like, a box cake mix is delicious. Like I made one for my birthday this year, And that is a huge compliment. But, I think at that particular moment, right, this narrator is feeling so raw and is really trying at something. And also, like, this is the first time she's really making something like so special for someone else. that's not just, I'm trying to practice this thing or learn something new. And, I think she's pretty self-involved. And, I was pretty self-involved at this moment. And so when the response is not exactly what you imagined it to be, she has a massive fit and, storms downstairs and gives some of the slices away to the neighbors. Of course, that was 6 years ago. So one would hope that I've matured a little bit. And now it would be that's an amazing compliment. Thank you so much.
That's what I was trying for.
Totally.
Yeah. You had this amazing opportunity to work in Italy when you were sort of on your baking. I mean, you kind of say, which is sort of amazing, that you basically became a baker or a pastry chef in a year. We won't get into details about this trip and your experience there, but what I did love about it and what I thought was so special, it wasn't a particularly positive experience. Mm-mm. And that's what makes it so, I want to swear, but I won't. So you know what? Good. I just loved that. It was not what you wanted it to be, and people were kind of mean, and I just loved that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I really wanted my eat, pray, love moment, and there was a lot of eating, not a lot of praying or loving. Yeah, it was a very strange and unnerving experience, and I think it was actually extremely formative. I think that when I went to Italy, I had this idea that I was truly going to learn the rarefied pastry chef space, right? Pastry as art form, pastry as perfection. And I think I realized that was not for me. Pursuing perfection for perfection's sake was not the kind of, dessert that I love to eat, that I wanted something a little messier and more comforting and a little more experimental and playful, something that I wanted to eat. And so I think it was actually an extremely important moment in my formation as a pastry chef or baker because it made me realize what I like.
Yeah.
And it was a weird time and all kinds of crazy things happened there. And, I have some regrets about what happened, but I'm really grateful for it at the same time.
Yeah. So we're kind of going to jump ahead. But now you work as a pastry chef at Little Egg. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. Is that you develop the menu and then you're there on the line? You're making pastries at work, or you come up with a menu and someone else is executing?
No, I'm doing production.
You are?
Yes. We, meaning me and Evan Hanser, who is the owner and chef at Egg, we sort of came up with the opening menu together. I developed all of the recipes. And then now I basically just change the menu every month or so. Yep. And I'm there doing production at least twice a week. The schedule changes based on book tour and all of these things. Yep. But yeah, it's really wonderful and special. I know we'll get into the Cruller, but that has been such a staple on the menu since the beginning. And, I think Egg has a sort of Southern comfort fare, nostalgia, diner style vibe to it. And so it's been really fun to lean into that with the menu while also putting, little unexpected twists on the pastries that feel like me,
For those who don't know, tell us what Cake Zine is.
Yeah. Cake Zine is a literary print magazine that explores the intersection of food and culture and often desserts and history and art. We've been going for, I guess, about 3 years now, and it's me, Eliza Barbanel, who is an incredible writer and editor and host of the podcast Taste, and then Noah Emmerich, who is our art director and designer based in Paris. And it's, I think very much about this idea that living and eating and cooking and food are interesting when you look at them in tandem, and that's when interesting insights emerge. And so we have very narrow themes for each issue. We've done everything from, humble pie and tough cookie and forbidden fruit to, our new issue is a special medium rare edition steak zine. So we have moved outside of the pastry case and into more carnivorous territory.
Do you think you'll continue that?
This is a special issue, so we're not going to just go down the meat rabbit hole.
But
for sure.
Maybe you would go down savory rabbit hole as opposed to just
definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's so funny because when it began, we didn't really think that much about the name because we just thought, we're making a zine or two and then it's gonna end, and it sort of has taken on a life of its own. I think that people were really hungry for more experimental interdisciplinary food writing, and we're really lucky to be publishing such amazing voices. So we just called it Cake Zine and then pretty swiftly stopped writing about cake. So yeah, savory terrain is absolutely not off the table. You'll have to tune in to find out what's next. But
now we're going to talk about your book.
Oh.
Will This Make You Happy? Kind of similar to the Instagram handle, love. Hybrid kind of memoir cookbook. Although for me, it almost reads more like every time a recipe came, I was like, oh. Like rather than be like, where are the recipe? Like I was very into your story.
Oh, I'm glad.
And yeah, and it also may be the way the book is produced. You know, the recipes come at the end of each chapter. Talk to me about that choice. You're right. It's like brings together baking recipes, coming of age story about desire and dessert. I love that.
Yeah. So I really think of this as a narrative cookbook, which is to me this like meaningful entwinement of recipes and sort of propulsive storytelling that is emerging from the food. And I think that there are a lot of like memoirs with recipes, which is, or, you know, novels with like a recipe sort of tacked on as an addendum. And there are a lot of cookbooks that maybe don't have as much narrative writing. But I was truly interested in that intersection. I wanted this to be both a really sort of useful technical text and also a story that was like juicy and fun to read and you could really sort of like emotionally map onto. And I think that to me, a lot of cookbooks, especially like blockbuster, glossy tomes are really like articulating the perfect experience of cooking or baking. And they're showing you like the finished product and like these are all the steps you need to take exactly to get there. And it's a lot less common to see the process of learning a new skill and like the humiliations and, you know, failures that are very much a part of what that is like. And so, you know, I've always in a lot of my work been really interested in what's happening in the wings of a recipe and the circumstances that bring someone to cooking or to baking. And so it felt very natural to me to write, you know, a story about what it means to try and learn a new skill and fall in love with your own ability again and pair that with, you know, technical recipes. And so, you know, you have this narrative voice in the actual narrative part that is sort of bumbling along and trying to figure it out as she's going. And then you also have the finished result, which is like these recipes that are coming from years now of expertise and testing in a kitchen. And I think hopefully that gives the reader this sense that like, it's a process and that if things don't turn out right or well all the time, that's okay. And baking, even if it is often, you know, likened to a science or, you know, something else, this sort of very, you know, a recipe often feels like a mandate, that it can also be a process of transformation of the self, you know? And I think because I grew up reading a lot of novels and more narrative works, I felt like what would galvanize me into the kitchen, right? A story where I really care about the characters and the narrator and I can sort of envision myself into my own sort of narrative cookbook. That's going to incentivize me to really like learn something new and get into the kitchen. So it felt to me like a very natural form. And you know, I think that there weren't a ton of examples that felt like they were doing it in this particular way. And so I wanted to write it in the way that I saw it.
You said, I think in talking about Cake Zine, I read this, that mood and emotion in recipe writing are really important to you. And it feels like in some ways the chapters are like really long, awesome head notes connected because head notes are the best. I have learned that when I interview people, unless there's just like so much about them on the internet that it's the easy peasy to find out everything, the real way to find out about people is for those of us that write cookbooks and write personal head notes, you can learn so much about people.
You totally can. And there's such an incredible range of styles of head note. Like, I mean, I think of, or, you know, head notes that are essays. Like I think of, you know, Fancy Desserts by Brooks Headley, which is just like, he has like the most incredible singular writerly voice. And you learn so much about that incredible man through this book where he's just like, you know, fucking up beautiful desserts in the best possible way and, you know, reconstructing them into something totally new. So I totally agree. I think that I really wanted the narrative portion of the book to exist in relation to the recipes themselves, but also to really be in its own right, like a page turner, like something you really want, like a journey you want to take alongside with the narrator. Totally.
I love that you have said that it did not make you happy while you were writing.
Good Lord.
Which makes sense. The artistic creative process can be so good and so bad.
Yeah, I think that I was just like, we were opening Egg at the time that I was working on it. So I was there very full time. And I was also doing an MFA and also doing Cake Zine. And so it felt like I had so many balls in the air and I was so nervous. Can I do this? Can I write something good? I have this idea, right? I have this this hybrid idea. Can I actualize it in a way that's actually interesting? And I was terrified. So I think I did deprive myself of the pleasure of the creative process, which, like, in retrospect, I feel sad that I did that. But I think that sometimes the hardest things and the best things for you are not going to be that fun while it's happening, you know?
It's true.
It's not going to make you happy then, but maybe it'll make you happy after.
A couple of hot takes from the front matter that I love. First, I loved that bakers fail often. Failure is inevitable. I mean, obvious for those of us that do it. But for those that don't, like, so true. Like, can we please be reminded of that all the time? Because then you feel less alone when you're in your kitchen and it's not working.
Totally. And I think that is, like, an important tenet in the book is that, like, there are so many moments in the narrative where, like, I am humiliating myself. Like, the madeleines are pockmarked with white heads. Like, the cake has sunk in the center. And it's just an inevitable part of learning something and doing anything. I still make mistakes so often. And, you know, I think one of the other moments in the front matter that I think is worth underscoring is this idea that, like, just because something doesn't work out doesn't mean you throw it away. Right? And I think that, you know, often you can feel really discouraged and you're like, I don't want to look at this, this, you know, embodiment of my failure. But I really do abide by this rule of if I have burned something or underbaked it or it just hasn't come out quite right, I will chuck it in the freezer, I will label it, and I will find another use for it. And there are a lot of ways, as you know, obviously, to find other uses for things that have gone awry. And I think that's just something I wish I'd heard more.
Yep. And then the other hot take I love is to use salt and vanilla with abandon.
Oh, hell yeah.
Which I do. And we will talk about this when we talk about the recipe, but I love the way you talk about and use salt in the recipe. So we're going to talk about that now. Yay! So the cruller, we're going to talk about the lemon poppy seed cruller. There's also a plum cardamom, and we'll talk about that kind of flavor. I think one thing about this recipe that's important to you is that you can sort of choose your own adventure. You make a lot of different things with it. It actually won New York Magazine's Best Pastry in New York the first year that egg was open. Incredible. The glaze and flavor change nearly every month based upon seasonality. I thought this was interesting. When you make it in the bakery or when you make it in the restaurant, you're using a very local all-purpose flour with kind of a coarser, heavier texture. But in the book version, you're using all-purpose and you're adding just a tiny bit of whole wheat. I thought that was really clever.
Thank you.
Because at first I was like, is this a whole wheat cruller? And then I understood, because it's only 2.5 maybe it's 1.5 tablespoons. It's a tiny amount. That was just to give you that kind of slightly more artisanal flour vibe.
It's giving you a little bit of, like, the, you know, nutty sort of complexity of a whole grain flour. And then also it's giving you a little bit of sturdiness and structure, right? That was one of the things when we were testing before we were opening, when we started working with the local flours, that I realized was actually such a boon about working with them, was that this is actually allowing the cruller to stay crisp for longer, which is something you really want.
Would you not be able to achieve that with bread flour? Because that's a different issue and that's more about a protein content?
It's protein content. I've never tried it with bread flour, and maybe I would encourage giving that a go. Why not? But I would imagine that it's going to be chewier in a way that you might not want.
It would have to be some kind of combination. I also loved this. You can fry the piped crullers fresh, but you like to freeze them first for the ideal crunchy exterior and the popover-like center, which I loved that description because I love popovers. But I thought that we'll talk about that more when we get to that part of the recipe. But I thought that was really interesting that we're frying them frozen. I love that.
Yeah. No, I found that it really does yield a more even fry. I mean, part of it was that at Little Egg, we just for production purposes,
you don't have a choice.
That's how we have to do it. We literally cannot have them coming from the, we have a lean-in, not even a walk-in. There's no room for fresh piped crullers. But I've found when I was testing at home as well that you are really going to have like a much crunchier exterior. It's going to fry more evenly, but the center remains sort of custardy, which is really the pleasure of a French-style cruller.
100%. So first we'll make the choux dough in a small bowl. We're going to whisk together some eggs, some egg whites until homogeneous. And you say that the high proportion of egg whites is going to give us that custardy soft center with the crisp exterior. And are the egg whites also in the versionette egg?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like this is like basically identical to
that recipe.
It's just that it's scaled down and there's some small shifts for just ingredients.
So we'll transfer this egg mixture to a liquid measuring cup in a medium pot over medium heat. We're going to combine tap water, I assume, room temperature tap water. Combine water, unsalted butter, granulated sugar, kosher salt. Cook till the butter melts, whisking until smooth. Are we whisking continuously, or we just start whisking once the butter melts?
You just want the butter to melt. This is a very forgiving recipe. I have tried so many iterations of it. You use water instead of milk just for fat content. You can leave it. You can leave it going. You just if you see that the, butter isn't melting, smoothly into the rest of the liquid, you can just give it a thwack or whatever. But I'll leave it going, at the restaurant.
I put skim milk as opposed to whole milk, but I could also use water in my popovers for that crispy,
totally
less fat, kind of like your egg white thing. We're going to bring the mixture to a simmer. Then we're going to add this all-purpose flour plus a teeny bit of whole wheat flour. Brands for those that you love for home cooks?
I mean, I guess for home cooks, I love King Arthur. They've got some nice flours. But I think
anything.
If you can find anything. And if you can find local flour, I mean, that's preferable for sure. Stirring
vigorously with a wooden spoon until the mixture is homogeneous. Then, I already said this, very small amount of whole wheat, like a tablespoon and a half, makes that AP a little bit coarser to mimic your flour at the restaurant. We'll turn the heat to low. We'll cook, stirring until a film forms, which people who've made choux before will know what this means. But basically, the dough on the bottom of the pot is smooth and sort of almost begins to pull away. It's kind of magic.
It's magic. Totally. It becomes just, it sort of is moving towards the center in a ball.
Yeah.
And you can see that at the bottom, there's a little bit of residue essentially that it's starting to leave.
Yeah.
And you want to really cook it so that you're cooking out that raw flour flavor, but also getting rid of as much moisture as possible so that you can add as much egg as possible.
Yeah, I love that. That's for 3 to 4 minutes. Then we'll transfer that to the bowl of a stand mixer fitted with a paddle attachment or a large bowl with a hand mixer. Mix on medium until it cools to room temp, about 10 minutes. You say that it's really important to allow that sort of panade or doughy paste to cool completely before we add the eggs, and that will help the crullers emerge really tall.
Yeah.
So we're going to add vanilla. Do you have a favorite vanilla?
I love using vanilla paste.
Yep.
I mean, Nielsen Massey is great. Halala, also great. Yeah.
So we'll add vanilla, some lemon zest, and I noticed that for this topping, the lemon curd poppy seed, you put a little lemon zest in the cruller. And then for the plum cardamom, you put a teeny bit of orange zest.
Yeah. But choose your own adventure. It's if you want a little lime, if you don't want citrus at all, if you want some cinnamon in the base,
just go for it.
I think, the point of all of the recipes in the book are play.
So we're going to add the vanilla and the lemon zest. We'll mix until smooth, about 20 seconds, scraping down the sides and bottoms under the bowl with a rubber spatula. Turn the speed to low, gradually add the eggs and the white, and then stop when the dough is shiny and thick and smooth with a pliable consistency, 4 to 5 minutes. I feel like that's another like moment.
Oh, totally.
It's so
choux
beautiful.
Dough is so beautiful. It's like a sleepy dough.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it hangs off the platter.
Yeah, and I just love that you cook it. People don't understand how easy it is.
It's so easy.
Yeah,
it's so easy.
Yeah. So, yes, just what you said. Tell us when the choux dough is ready, tell us what it's doing.
So it should be hanging off the paddle with sort of like a V shape. It shouldn't fall entirely, but it should be sort of like elegantly slumping.
Yeah.
That's how you know that you haven't added too much egg, but that you've added enough so that it really is going to like get buoyant and big when it hits heat and fry.
Yep. You say you might have a little leftover egg, depending on your kitchen humidity, et cetera, how long you cook the choux dough for. We'll transfer the dough to a piping bag and fit it with a star tip. Then we'll line a half-sheet pan with parchment paper, take a second piece of parchment, and cut out 14 parchment squares. So this is a little anal, but if it's a piece of parchment that fits a half-sheet pan, we just kind of figure out how to get 14 out of it.
Yeah,
they don't matter the size.
It doesn't matter the size, really. It's just so that when you're frying, you have a little base to be able to move the cruller around.
Yeah. It's like a little sling.
Yeah.
Then we'll place a parchment square on the scale. We'll tear the scale, hold the pastry bag about 2 inches above the parchment, and evenly pipe a circle of the dough with one edge overlapping the end of a circle. Do you ever, like, with a dampened finger, try to smooth that, or no, because you want the ridges?
You do not want to use your finger to smooth the ridges.
But I meant the part
part where it's overlapping.
Yeah.
100%. You totally can, and I do at the restaurant.
Right.
I think it's because I move so fast now and have done them so many times, you kind of, with a flick of the wrist, shouldn't have to do that.
I got you.
But, you know, if one comes out a little wonky, all you do is use a little water and, you know, push it into the shape you want it to be.
Perfect. Diameter of the donut's about 4 inches. Let the dough fall naturally. I think you mean from the piping bag. And I love this. If you don't like the shape of the cruller, scrape it off and put it back in the bag and do it again.
Yes.
which is another indication of how flexible and easy, malleable the dough is. Using a parchment square as a sling, carefully transfer the pipe cruller to the prepared pan, continue with the dough, refill the pastry bag as needed, and here's where we freeze 1 to 2 hours or ideally overnight. If overnight is ideal, will that be like even a crispier, like the more time?
It's just kind of, I don't know the science behind this, folks, but the longer it sits in the freezer, the more even the fry is basically what I've noticed over time. So I think it's just because it's like so frozen solid that then that center is really staying sort of custardy, and also like the rest of the dough is so cold that it's hitting the oil and it's a shock to the eggs.
So since we're making these poppy seed glazed lemon curd crullers, we're going to make the glaze. We'll medium skillet over medium heat. We'll toast some poppy seeds. Brand of poppy seeds?
We use burlap and barrel at the restaurant.
Toast some poppy seeds, gently stirring until fragrant. In a medium bowl, we'll whisk together powdered sugar, lemon juice, whole milk, vanilla, salt, and combine those with the poppy seeds. And this is where your genius comes in. Taste and season with more salt if desired, which is so great because it's so savory, and it's so great to see it in a sweet recipe.
Oh, it's in like every single recipe of mine.
Yeah. Well, I noticed because I read your book.
Yeah, taste and adjust for vanilla and salt and for other things. It's just like, that's when you know.
Yeah. Totally. So that's our glaze. And then to make the lemon curd, we're going to prepare a large bowl of ice cold water, medium saucepan over medium heat. We'll whisk sugar and lemon juice and egg yolks and lemon zest. Cook until pale, thickened, bubbling, 8 to 12 minutes. You should be able to draw a visible line on the back of the coated wooden spoon with a finger, which is always the way I do it. Remove from the heat, add unsalted butter, whisk. We'll whisk in some salt and vanilla. Tell us about the citric acid. How come we're adding that, and where can we get it?
Citric acid you can get online basically anywhere these days. It's extremely inexpensive. It's, what Sour Patch Kids is coated in. I love citric acid. I think that it really adds like a sort of pizzazzy spike to any pastry without adding any extra moisture. And so I have found that sharp tang at the back of your throat is something that citric acid really helps with. And I really like a punchy curd. Like I want it to be punchy.
Yeah, no, I love that. Should I picture, when you say Sour Patch, now I'm picturing the sugar that's on a sour.
No, it's not sweet whatsoever.
But what's its form?
Oh, it's a lot more powdery than, it's between like a fine sea salt and like sugar granules. Okay. Like white sugar granules.
It's pretty,
So it's pretty, it incorporates really easy. A little bit goes a really long way, and it's really one of those ingredients that you should just be tasting and adjusting with.
I can taste it in the back of my throat right now, and I want it so bad. And then we'll transfer that to medium bowl. Place the bowl of lemon curd over an ice bath. Stir until cool. Can we use it at room temp? Like, can it just come to room temp and then we're going to use it on our crullers? Or do you like it to be cold?
So I like it to be cold because we're using it as a drizzle in this instance. So you want there to be like slightly more defined ridges when you're, drizzling it over the cruller. But it will be absolutely delicious room temperature. And you could serve it as a dip if you wanted,
Yeah. So we'll transfer the curd to an airtight container. Press a piece of plastic directly on the surface so we don't get a little skin. And now we're going to fry the crullers. So we'll set a wire rack inside of a half-sheet pan. I always use like paper towel and newspapers. Do you not put anything under to absorb oil? Maybe there's
You don't need it.
Yeah. We'll fill a deep skillet or a pot over medium-high heat with 3 inches of neutral oil. Canola? Like what are you using?
Canola's totally fine.
I read somewhere, maybe on Smitten Kitchen, that peanut oil is an incredible oil to fry in. Have you heard this? And would you never use that in the restaurant because of allergies?
I don't think we would ever use that in the restaurant because of allergies. Also because we are using the same deep fryer for basically everything.
Yep.
I haven't heard that, but maybe I'll give it a go.
Yeah. I was surprised by that. But anyway, 3 inches of neutral oil, heat to 365. Why do I think it's like 350? Like, is 365 like a Tanya thing, or is that just a thing and I live under a rock?
I don't know if that's a me thing, but it is the temperature that I fry the crullers at the restaurant because I have found that going slightly higher is better. The outside is going to get a little darker, a little crispier. Yep. And again, you really want that sort of balance between soft
custard.
center and and so that's why I fry.
I also wonder if because we're frying something frozen it helps.
Dropping the temperature.
And then we don't have to fry for so long that it would be awful, like if the oil got absorbed.
Totally.
I thought this was interesting. So we're going to peel off our parchment squares from the crullers and carefully slide them into the hot oil. Some recipes, I feel like, and it's probably because they're not frozen,
Yes.
you put the paper into the oil. You just put the cruller in and then you pick out the paper.
Yeah.
Is it just about it being frozen?
It's because it's frozen, and it's also just a lot easier that way. But if it were not frozen, you would not be able to do that.
Yes. Yeah. Which is so like, why doesn't everybody freeze their crullers?
I don't know.
Like
They
that
should.
is really going to be the name of this episode. Freeze your crullers.
Freeze your cruller.
So we're going to put the cruller into the hot oil, ridge side down. If the cruller flips over, no problem. Just use tongs to flip it back. We'll add 1 or 2 crullers, depending. We don't want to overcrowd. Fry the crullers until the top puffs up, is yellow, and the bottoms are a deep chestnut brown, firm to the touch, 6 to 8 minutes. Then we're flipping with our tongs, frying until the edges feel firm, bottoms deeply golden brown, 6 to 8 minutes again. So that is
It's a long fry.
And that's because it's frozen.
That's because it's frozen, and it can really take it. These crullers, they do not get greasy.
Yeah.
They do not. It is an extremely light and crisp bite, and so I have pushed it far. And we're not frying them for as long in the restaurant because we're using an industrial fryer. So it's slightly different. But when you're doing it in a home kitchen, you can fry them for quite a minute.
Yeah, that's good to know. I love that.
And they last, and I think because of the long fry also, they last for a while. They stay sturdy and crisp for hours and hours.
Now we're going to glaze and fill the crullers, so we'll gently dip the ridge top of the cruller into the poppy seed glaze, swirling around to ensure even coating. Return the cruller glaze side up to the wire rack, repeat, and then set aside to set, and then we'll fill our piping bag with lemon curd, cut a small hole at the bottom. So are we using a big plastic piping bag?
Yeah, you can totally use a big plastic piping bag. You could repurpose a olive oil squeeze bottle,
like a Ziploc bag.
A Ziploc bag, yeah.
But you're not putting a pastry.
No. I'm just doing a really small hole so I can zigzag over it.
Yep. And then pipe the curd in stripes or zigzags over the glaze. Serve immediately. Those are delicious. Now we're going to just quickly talk about the cardamom plum. To make the cardamom glaze, powdered sugar, whole milk, vanilla, cardamom, kosher salt, sort of the same glaze.
Yeah.
What I love is I've only ever flavored glaze with cinnamon. I love the idea of cardamom or being a little more excited with what you can go crazy with glaze.
Oh, glaze is like a blank canvas. I mean, you can do really anything with it. I mean, we do toffee and maple glaze and bright orange citrus and we do chai. There's just again, I think that glazes and frostings and, ice cream bases, all of these things are totally rife for experimentation and you can be tasting as you go.
Well, also the fact that it's flavored is going to make it less sweet. Flavoring it with, maple syrup, maybe not. But in everything else, I feel like the cardamom, the cinnamon, anything like that, basil, it's all going to
it's adding complexity.
Yeah.
Add some tahini. I mean, totally. And also, I think I'm always thinking about balance in my desserts. And so, a lot of my glazes do have citric acid or are using a really high quantity of fresh lemon juice or lime juice, right? So Natasha has used a lot of vinegars in her glazes, which I think is so genius.
Smart.
Yeah. So I think that just thinking about ways to cut through all that sugar.
Sugar is huge. Agreed. I usually do it with salt, but you can do it and try
with both. Yeah.
Turn it into a salty whipped cream or whatever it is.
Totally.
But I love this.
I think what's really nice about this recipe is that you can make it as simple or complex as you want. At the restaurant, we right now are doing, spiced cinnamon sugar and you just fry it and you throw it in there. And then we'll do a little miso caramel on top, but you can omit that. You can skip it. It's kind of a choose your own adventure.
Love. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Tanya. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Oh, thank you, Jessie.
You're welcome. That's it for today's show. Don't forget to follow She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and tell your pals about us. You can find today's recipe at cherrybomb.substack.com. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. Our producers are Carrie Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking!